Hello, welcome to this week's Sparta Live webinar. Γεια σας, καλώς ορίσατε στη διαδικτυακή διάλεξη της σειράς μας Sparta Live. First of all, καλή Τσικνοπέμπτη to all our Greek friends and of course to all who feel Greek. I'm Chrysanthi Galou, Director of the Center for Spartan and Peloponnesian Studies and Associate Professor of Archaeology at the University of Nottingham. My co-host, as for every webinar, is Dr. Petros Doukas, the Mayor of the modern city of Sparti. Today's webinar addresses a rather unknown and understudied aspect of Spartan culture, that of medical science, with a focus on the Spartan doctors Archagathos and Claudius Agathinos in Rome. And of course, we thought that the most suitable person to talk about this subject is Dr. Yannis Tsilogiannis from Sparti, who wrote his PhD on the topic. It's time to turn over to my co-host, Mayor Doukas, to introduce our speaker. Petros, over to you.
Many thanks, Chrysanthi, and many thanks to the whole Nottingham team for what you have been doing so far, and very eagerly ready to hear what Yannis Tsilogiannis has to say. Yannis is a graduate of the Faculty of Philosophy of the University of Athens and holds a PhD in the history of medicine from the University of Crete. He wrote his doctoral thesis on medicine in ancient Sparta under the supervision of Professor Dimitris Pandidos. He has co-authored with Professor Pandidos studies on the Asclepia in Laconia in 2005, endocrinology in ancient Sparta 2007, and eclectics and breast cancer 2007. His book on medicine in ancient Sparta is co-authored with Professor Pandidos and was published quite recently in Greek. Yannis works in public secondary education in Sparti, and in addition to his love about ancient Sparta, for the last 25 years he has been engaged in the construction of musical instruments and the study and functional restoration of historical musical instruments, another of the basic precepts of the Lycurgian, the greatest lawmaker efforts to instill in Spartans, music and harmony and what have you. Professor, let me tell you that but let me tell you of our initiative, that in Sparta and Taygetos there are various plants that are actually having, or according to local tradition, some medicinal properties. Saint John wort is one, the Hypericum, and the Achillea milleforum is the other. And locals create medicines for some sort of skin care, burns, for example, made out of Achillea and what have you. And we in the city of Sparta, it's a good opportunity to tell you this, Chrysanthi, are trying to make an association of small family type producers of these cosmetics and skin care products and try to make something bigger and better by uniting their efforts. So it's something we will talk, an association of these producers, about 10 of them, and we'll try to make something bigger and better. So back to you, the floor, and eagerly awaiting to hear what you have to teach us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I would like to thank the Center for Spartan and Peloponnesian Studies and Ms. Galou for inviting me to talk about a subject that sheds light on an almost unknown aspect of Spartan history. Being a Spartan myself, I will try to be as much as laconic as I can so as not to tire you. So one of the main characteristics of every advanced society is the development of medical science. As early as in Homer's epic poems, there are references about the anatomy of the human body, as well as the presence and actions of doctors on battlefields. In Homer's Odyssey, the profession of the doctors is one of the four most common professions, together with that of the carpenters, the seers, and the builders, which are professions practiced by turned professionals. Of course, Sparta had to follow the same rule. The widespread worship of Asclepius, the rest medical deities, as well as the medical nature of the Dioscuri, confirms that in a theoretical religious level. One basic testimony for the existence of medical tradition is given on the inscription which was copied by Formod in the sanctuary of Apollon Amykleon. The copied inscription, which can be found in Formod's archive in the National Library of France in Paris, refers to the efforts VDA, together with a list of 6 doctors and 6 ambassadors, meaning surgeons. Men who were reported as doctors were the following: Δαμόφιλος Λυσάνδρου, Πλάτων Δαματρίου, Λικανδύρ Πλάτωνος, Λυσανδύρ Δαμονάκου, Άλκηπος Δαμοφύλου και Λαμπρίδιος Στεφάνου. Surgeons, ambassadors, are Δαμόφιλος Λαμπριδίου, Δαμόφιλος Λαμάχου, Δαμάτριος Λυσίπου, Αριστανδύρ Λυκομάχου, Λύσιπος Δαματρίου και Αριστόμαχος Αριστομάχου. A careful study of the names confirms a possible first-degree relation, as in that of father and son. On the other hand, all the names are written in the Doric dialect, and based on what we can infer that there are either Spartan or coming from areas which were dependent on Sparta. The mention of the efforts in the VDA is related to their duties, one of which was to select doctors and surgeons. Xenophon Lacedaemonian Politia writes that Lycurgus was the first to appoint military doctors in the army by law. He even gave them a powerful rank in the structure of the army, as he stated that doctors stay in the same tent as the king, like the rest of the army officials, named the flute players in the seers. Ους δε επί τούτης τέταχθε ο πρεσβύτατος, τους περί δημοσίων συντάτη, εις είδε ούτι όσοι αν σύσκηνιώσει των ομοίων, και μάντις και ιατροί και αυλητέ, οι του στρατού άρχοντες και εθελούσιοι, ήτεν εσπάρηση, ώστε των ενομισμένων γίγνεσθε. We can know for sure what the analogy between soldiers and doctors in the Spartan army was. However, an extract from Kyro Anavasis by Xenophon give us a basis on which we can think and draw conclusions. Επειδή ούτε γένετο υπέρ των υπομένων πολεμίων, ουκέτι επιτίθονται πολέμοι της κατεβαίνουσι, δεδικότε μη αποτμηθήσαν και αφωτέρθε αυτόν γένετο οι πολέμοι. Ούτω το λοιπόν της ημέρας πορευόμενοι, οι μένεν τη οδό, κατά τους γυλόφους, οι δέκατο όρος επιπαριόντες, αφήκοντες στα σκόμας και οι ιατρούς κατέστησαν 8. Πολλοί γάρισαν τετρωμένοι. To be exact, Xenophon reports that at the end of the battle there were 8 doctors ready to treat the wounded. The readiness of the doctors, combined with the number of the wounded soldiers and the division and structure of the Spartan army, make us conclude that it was likely for every unit of 50 men in general, and not only for the army of ancient Sparta, there was a military doctor who was responsible for the medical and surgical treatment of the wounds. Well-known doctors from whom there are historical references in various time periods are the Dr. Tisias from Knidos, Periandros, the Δημόσιος Γιατρός public doctor Zamiadas, who offered his services free of charge in Yithio when the city suffered from a crisis, and of course we shouldn't omit the inscription found in Kythira, which writes about a person who studied medicine in Vies Laconias, Pavlopetri, but nevertheless wasn't able to cure himself when he got sick. The Spartan Archagathos, son of Lysanios, must have been a military doctor. He is the first Greek doctor to be reported in Rome in 219 BC, when Lucius Aemilius and Marcus Livius were consuls. According to the historian Cassius Femina, Archagathos was invited to Rome to offer his medical services. He was the one to introduce new methods in the treatment of wounds and sores in the Roman society, and must have been extremely effective since the Romans welcomed him with enthusiasm. He was given the title of Roman citizen, and he was also referred to as vulnerarius, traumatologist. Furthermore, an infirmary was built at the public expense in a much frequented square of Rome. Possibly because he was encouraged by his reputation and popularity, Archagathos attempted more and more complex operations, without paying great attention to cautery or the recovery of his patients. As a result, the Roman society, who had given him the name Vulnerarius, doubtful for his principles and morality, named him Carnifex, executioner, hangman, butcher. Archagathos was then obliged to abandon the city as a fugitive and return to Sparta. However, he had shown effectively the superiority of the Greek medicine. His reputation must have been widespread because in a letter to a doctor named Dionysius in Alexandria, a wound dressing used by Archagathos is proposed to be used to treat an injury. Asclepiades from Bithyni, who was the one to make Greek medicine acceptable by the Romans, probably influenced by by what had happened to Archagathus, first introduced himself to the Roman society as an orator, and only after he had acquired powerful acquaintances did he practice medicine. Indicative to the Romans' repulsion toward the Greeks is the letter of Marcus Porcius Cato, who was an ardent enemy of Hellenism as it was becoming more and more popular to his son. He writes, "Whatever these people reach with their books, they destroy everything, and they do so especially when they send their doctors. They have vowed to kill all barbarians by practicing medicine, and they take a lot of money for this, so that people will trust them. They consider even us to be barbarians, and they insult us even more vulgarly when they called us old-fashioned. I forbid you to have any communication with the doctors." What can be inferred by examining the extra evidence that suggests the development of medicine in Sparta is that Archagathos was in all probability an Asclepiades, who brought to Rome a pre-existing culture and practice which originated from Sparta and its way of life. We should not overlook the fact that Archagathos' presence in Rome is attested in 219 BC, that is 3 years after the defeat of Cleomenes by Antigonus Doson in the Battle of Sellasia in 222 BC and the attack of the latter against Sparta. It was at this moment that Archagathos reached Rome after an invitation of the Roman state, which had followed the example of the Greek city-states as far as health is concerned. It's most likely that Archagathos was a military doctor in Sparta, and he might even have taken part in the Battle of Sellasia. It's equally likely that, because of his disappointment on how things turned out, he abandoned Sparta, where the foreign guard had settled, pursuing a better luck in the city of opportunities. In association with the aforementioned fact, special attention should be paid to the name Vulnerarius, traumatologist. Archagathos was probably given this name because he was the channel through which Rome got acquainted with the wide knowledge of Sparta concerning the treatment of war wounds. Apart from Archagathos, the Spartan doctor Clavius Agathinos is one of the many figures of history whose work fell into oblivion, not necessarily because of its insignificance. He was born in Sparta, but he worked in Rome during the period 50 AD to 100 AD, where he taught and practiced medicine. He owes the name Clavius either to Nero, who gave him this name as a token of gratitude for his work, or because he belonged to a wealthy aristocratic family of Sparta. Most probably, he had got the title of Roman citizen, as every foreign doctor had, thanks to Julius Caesar. His philosophy teacher was Stoic Cornutus, while his teacher of medicine was Athenaeus from Attalia, founder of the School of Pneumatics, which was connected with the teachings of Stoic philosophers. After all, generally speaking, medicine was closely related to philosophy during the classical Hellenistic and the Roman times. Initially, Archagathos belonged to the school founded by Athenaeus from Attalia, but later he broke off and founded the Eclectic School of Medicine, as Galen calls it. Δοκί δε και τέταρτην αίρεσιν εξευρήν Αγαθήνος Λακεδαιμόνιος, ειν ονόμασεν επισενθητικήν, ένι δε εκλεκτικήν, έτερη την εκτικήν. The development of medicine during the Hippocratean and Alexandrian period of medicine was defined mainly by specific school medical systems. These are the Hippocratean, the dogmatic school, the scientific or Alexandrian school, the empirics, the empirical school, the methodics, the methodical school, the pneumatics, and the last Greek school of medicine were the eclectics founded by Agathinos. During Agathinos' times, the trend in medicine and philosophy was selective compromise. This method was followed by the school of eclectics too, namely the borrowing and selection of theories and medical methods from the other schools of medicine. It is obvious that In this way, a global and exhaustive treatment of elements was achieved. It is worth mentioning that this was the last Greek medical school, and that ended the war between the medical schools of antiquity. Apart from that, the name itself of this school suggests the combination of theories of other medical schools. The school that Agathinos founded was very popular and long-lasting. Some of the greatest medical figures belonged to the school of eclectics, such as Archigenes from Apamea, Herodotus, Leonidas from Alexandria, immediate students of Agathinos, and apart from this, many more followed the eclectics doctrine, such as Marcellinus from Side, Satyrus from Pergamon, teacher of Galen, Rufus from Ephesus, Philumenos, and of course, Galen, the greatest intellectual figure of the Greek medicine after Hippocrates. There were two trends which formed in the circles of eclectics. On the one hand, there were those who were occupied with special fields of medicine, and on the other hand, there were those who tried to offer a more global theoretical basis to medicine. A characteristic of the first trend was the close occupation with pharmacology. However, during the Roman times, due to general ambience of luxury and opulence, additional pharmaceutics were created, even were made to meet the refined and special needs of the time, even hair dyes. Agathinos' works, unfortunately, aren't saved, with the exception of some extracts, fragments, from which we can draw general conclusions about his medical practice. However, we can infer that he studied closely the nature of the pulse rates and that he suggested hydrotherapy throughout the year, even for young children. Some works which are considered his are Perimetriteon, about fevers, Perisphygmon, about pulses, Perilevoru, about Hellevorus and its use, Perithermolusias και Ψυχρολουσίας, about hydrotherapy. A contemporary scholar draws information for his work from references to his name mainly made by Galen, references which have to do both about him and his close students. The most important references in Agathinos' medical practice and his work is given by his far later Olivasios, who cites viewpoints of Archigenes, a close student of Agathinos, about his teacher. Ακριβής όν και ου πιστεύουν την εκλογή, αλλά και πήραν σε ασφαλή ανδεόμενος, ετίθετο νουν την πήραν εν ασφαλή. So he was both precise and careful, and his most useful tool in order to reach a diagnosis and cure was experimentation. The main method of diagnosis for the school of pneumatics, in which Agathinos was initially a member, was the study of the pulse rates. Agathinos was closely occupied with the pulse rates according to reports given by Galen, who mentions that ο γουν Αγαθήνος, όμως και αυτός έγραψε εν βιβλίων όλων το πρώτο περισφυγμόν. Agathinos wrote an entire book about pulse rates, where in the first part he explained the names of the pulse rates. It's worth mentioning that the viewpoints of eclectics about pulse rates, the way they were expressed by Agathinos, his famous students, and of course Galen, were used and remained valid up until the 17th century. William Harvey expressed his own theory about pulse rates in 1628, which deviates from the principles of eclectics and Galen. About Hellevorus, according to Caelius Aurelianus, a doctor of the 5th century AD, Agathinos wrote a text about Hellevorus and its use since it was a common medicinal plant of antiquity. In general, Hellevorus is a leafy plant with perennial roots which is found in mountain regions. From the 11 species of Hellevorus which can be found all over Europe, there is only one species in Greece, its name being Hellevorus cyclophilus. You can find this plant in the clearings of mountainous forests. Its blossom has light yellow and greenish shades, and it appears in early spring, after the snow has melted. It is commonly known as Scarfi, Carpi, Carpi, even Agleoras. Archigenes used Agathinos' text in his work Περιδόσεις του Ελεφόρου, about Hellevorus dosage. Orivasios cites unchanged the text in which Archigenes describes the experimental administration of Hellevoros to a dog by Agathinos in order for him to observe the frequency and intensity of vomiting that Hellevoros causes. So Archigenes reports that without making random moves and actions, but led by his experience to safe results, Agathinos was able to administer the proper quantity to the patient so as to have the expected laxative results without the side effects of this plant, since when administered in high dosages, it causes vomiting, diarrhea, pain in the peptic organs, palsy, and eventually death. Also, Orivasios mentions the existence of the text by Agathinos περί θερμολουσίας και ψυχρολουσίας, in which Agathinos suggests hydrotherapy throughout the year, even for small children. Taking into consideration the Roman passion for baths, the fact that he dedicated a large part of his text to the hygienic properties of baths isn't surprising. What he believed was that although they could relieve tiredness and help digestion in the short run, warm baths were meant for people who were timid, frightened of cold water. On the other hand, the contribution of cold baths was enormous, even for those who didn't pay much attention to their health, since cold baths invigorated the body, intensified the senses, and kept the body firm and strong even at an old age. In contrast, warm baths were made the person pale and weak, and they affected negatively the process of digestion. It's worth mentioning that Lycurgos and Solon have forbidden by law the warm baths, only cold. Agathinos applauds the habit that barbarians had to frequently wash their children in cold water, while he disapproves of the contemporary habit of washing young children in warm water, mainly because their nannies wanted the children to calm down and not bother them during the night. He himself preferred to take a cold bath before bedtime, since he knew that a warm bath could cause an epileptic fit. According to Agathinos, cold baths, in contrast to warm ones, could be taken any time in the year, provided the water wasn't extremely cold, muddy or dirty. Seawater was especially good, since its salt gave it an added advantage. The best option, according to Agathinos, is a combination of cold baths and exercise, which he divides in 3 stages. The first bath has to be taken after dinner. The second dive must be longer, maybe combined with some swimming, but the bather should leave the water before getting too cold. In the third dive, the bather has to put his head and upper chest under the cold water of a spring, or, if there isn't one, to throw handfuls of water over his head. After that, it is imperative that the bather get rubbed and then massaged with oil, which will then be removed with a care comb, Striglida. After all the above are particularly effective, especially on a warm day. Agathinos himself liked to take a bath at night, as this made him sleep well. The only disadvantage of a cold bath was that the cold water could do harm to one's ears. This is why the bather should try to protect them as much as possible. Above all, in this extract, as well as in other ones, Agathinos emphasized the need to do all things in moderation, which should be everyone's basic rule, and he also stresses that it is the doctor's duty to respect the fears and the preferences of his patient. In conclusion, I believe that these doctors were the vehicle of a long medical tradition of the city, which was greatly preoccupied with health, exercise, fertility, and of course, its main problem, which was the shortage of men, oligandria. It's a scientific practice which condenses basic principles of Sparta, such as health, careful actions, like Agathinos did, and of course, the sense and the observance of moderation, the metron, and that's why I believe that they have a special place in Spartan history. So, thank you very much.
Excellent. Very exciting and very interesting for something that's not very well known. People have not seemed to have studied adequately these subjects, and thank you, Yanni, for bringing it to life to all of us. So from what you said, one prescription is use and live a moderate life.
Yes,
the other is take baths frequently, and maybe either some say cold baths or warm baths or in between, and maybe have a relaxing massage after the bath. What about botanical medicine and surgical medicine? Is there enough information if they did something that sounds very interesting or very modern to us, that they weren't so far behind in the medical science, either in pharmacology, using various medicines, as people in the villages here seem to use, and in other more complex cases?
Okay, can I answer in Greek something?
Yes, of course, yeah, we can translate, yeah.
Okay. Λοιπόν, έχει ιδιαίτερο ενδιαφέρον ότι ένα από τα πιο διάσημα φυτά της αρχαιότητας, το σύλφιο, το οποίο η αξία του ήταν ίση με το χρυσό, είναι συνδεδεμένο με τη λατρεία των Διόσκουρων. Δηλαδή, και αυτό το αναφέρει ο Παυσανίας. Δηλαδή, οι Διόσκουροι ήταν αυτοί ουσιαστικά που έφεραν το σύλφιο στη Σπάρτη. Το σύλφιο και το καστόριο, που είναι ένα υγρό, τώρα το καστόριο είναι ζωικής προέλευσης. Το σύλφιο είναι εξαφανισμένο φυτό βέβαια. Κάναμε κάποιες προσπάθειες, μήπως, ας το πούμε, δούμε κάποια αντίστοιχα με κάποιους βοτανολόγους, δεν μπορέσαμε, με τον καθηγητή τον κύριο Σπαντίδο. Ωστόσο, η αναφορά και η χρήση του ιατρική στην Σπάρτη ήταν πολύ διαδεδομένη. Βέβαια, το τελευταίο φυτό από αυτά δόθηκε ως δώρο στον Έρωνα, το τελευταίο φυτό από τότε. Έχει επίσης ενδιαφέρον ότι απεικονίζεται στη λακωνική κύλικα του Αρκεσίλα, του βασιλιά της Κυρίνης, εκεί το κυρηναϊκό σύλφιο, το οποίο ήταν ένα έργο, όπως ξέρει και η κυρία Γάλλου πάρα πολύ καλά, δημιουργία λακωνικού εργαστηρίου. Αναφορικά τώρα με υπόλοιπα φυτά της λακωνικής ιατρικής, της ιατρικής, ας πούμε, στη Σπάρτη δεν έχω... βέβαια, Χρυσάνθη, δεν ξέρω αν θες να μεταφράσεις αυτά που είπα για να συνεχίσω.
Yeah, I think I can translate now. Yanni says that one plant that they were using was silphium, which is now extinct, but it is connected with the cult of Dioscuri, who brought it to Sparta. Silphium is native to Libya, and it is depicted, the trade was also depicted on the Arkesilas cup. The king of Cyrene, and the cup was a product of a Laconian workshop. Alongside silphium, the last plant of which was given to Nero, Spartans were also using castoria, which is an animal-based kind of like remedy.
Επίσης, έχει ενδιαφέρον το γεγονός ότι στο ιερό του Ασκληπιού Αγνήτα, που αναφέρει ο Παυσανίας, το ξώανο της θεάς, το ξώανο του Θεού ήταν φτιαγμένο από το φυτό Agnus castus, τη λιγαριά που λέμε εμείς, της οποίας η καρπή είναι το λεγόμενο monk pepper, που επιδρά στην έκρηση ορμονών στον άνθρωπο και καθορίζει, ας το πούμε, τη γονιμότητα, για να μην πω πολλά και να μην έτσι μακρηγορήσω.
Okay. So another element we have, another plant is Agnus castus, and it's connected with the cult of Asclepius agnitas, whose xoanon, the wooden statue, was made of the plant, and it was used for hormones and reproduction. That's really interesting, Yannis. And can I ask you, since we are talking about Asclepius agnitas and the plant, I was reading recently about the Spartan oliganthropia or oligandria. So the use of Agnus castus would probably then be something that Spartan medical practitioners might have used to address this demographic problem.
Βέβαια, σαφέστατα υπάρχει μια μεγάλη σύνδεση μεταξύ των δύο, καθώς ουσιαστικά αποκαθιστά τον κύκλο της γυναίκας, το monk pepper, ας το πούμε, η καρπή της λιγαριάς. Επομένως, και σε άλλες περιπτώσεις καταπραίνει τη σεξουαλική επιθυμία, σε άλλες περιπτώσεις τη διεγείρη. Επομένως, πιθανότατα υπάρχει μία σύνδεση, πολύ σημαντική σύνδεση, σχετικά με την ολιγανδρία και την καταπολέμηση της ολιγανδρίας στην πόλη της Σπάρτης. Γιατί ήταν ένα από τα βασικά προβλήματα τα οποία απασχολούσαν τη σπαρτιατική κοινωνία.
So Yannis is responding that there seems to be a very close connection between the use of what we call monk's pepper, Agnus castus, and the problem of oligandria or oliganthropia, because it regulates the female circle and also is closely connected with sexual desire. So this may be something, you know, that people can start incorporating into the studies. But I think people may start being a bit anxious to ask their own questions, so you can start putting your questions on the chat. And Matt Thompson, as with every webinar, is here with us to run the Q&A. Matt, over to you.
Right, thank you very much, Chrysanthi, and thank you, Yannis. That was absolutely brilliant. If anyone has any questions, do send them in to us. I will do my best to ask as many as I can. So the first one here is, can we talk about a school of Spartan medicine, or is it part of a wider practice of Hellenic medicine?
Είναι ένα μέρος στην εποχή που αναπτύχθηκε στους ρωμαϊκούς χρόνους. Θα πρέπει να το δούμε σαν μια σχολή ευρύτερα ενταγμένη στον χώρο της ιατρικής επιστήμης, έτσι όπως αναπτύχθηκε τότε. Ουσιαστικά οι εκλεκτικοί έκαναν το εξής. Πήραν στοιχεία από όλες τις άλλες σχολές για να πετύχουν καλύτερη θεραπεία των ασθενειών. Επικεφαλής της προσπάθειας αυτής ήταν ο Σπαρτιάτης γιατρός. Δεν νομίζω ότι μπορούμε να μιλήσουμε ξεκάθαρα για μια σπαρτιατική ιατρική σχολή, αλλά για μια ελληνική ιατρική σχολή, η οποία ήταν και η τελευταία.
So we cannot really talk about a Spartan medical school, but we can include it into the wider Greek Hellenic school. In the Roman period, the eclectics gathered knowledge from all different fields and applied it to address the various issues.
Right, thank you. And to follow on from that, how much do we know about non-Greek influences on both Spartan medicine and this broader Greek medicine?
Sparta had strong connections with Alexandria, and because we are quite close, and even so, it's Alexandria was να το πω στα ελληνικά, sorry. Η Αλεξάνδρεια ήταν λοιπόν ένας βασικός χώρος, ένας πυρήνας ανάπτυξης της ιατρικής επιστήμης και η σχέση της Σπάρτης με την Αλεξάνδρεια σίγουρα επηρέασε πάρα πολύ την ανάπτυξη της ιατρικής στην πόλη. Άλλωστε, ειδικά στην Νότια Λακωνία, λατρεύονταν αιγυπτιακές θεότητες. Υπήρχαν ιερά δηλαδή αιγυπτιακών θεοτήτων. Επομένως, υπήρχε μια πολύ στενή σχέση η οποία αποκλείεται να μην επηρέασε και την ανάπτυξη της ιατρικής επιστήμης.
So there was a strong influence with Alexandria, and Alexandria at the time was the center of medical developments. And as a matter of fact, Yannis points to the fact that in southern Laconia, in particular the town of Voie, we have testimonies in Pausanias of cults of Egyptian deities. So this could reinforce this idea and connection between Sparta, Laconia, and Egypt, Alexandria.
Brilliant, thank you. We now have something here about a funeral monument in the Ashmolean Museum of Claudius Agathomerus, a Spartan doctor in Rome at the time of Claudius Agathinos. Do you know anything about this doctor? Is he known as an associate of Agathinos?
Όχι, δεν γνωρίζω κάτι. Αυτό που έχει όμως ιδιαίτερο ενδιαφέρον και πρέπει να το αναφέρουμε εδώ είναι ότι πρόσφατα στη Σπάρτη, πριν από λίγα χρόνια, στην περιοχή των Λιμνών, κοντά στο Πανεπιστήμιο, κύριε Δήμαρχε, ανεσκάφη ένας τάφος ιατρού, ο οποίος ήταν θαμμένος μαζί με ένα κουτί, στο οποίο είχε τα ιατρικά του εργαλεία, όπως είναι ο θησαυρός του Μπίνκε, να το πούμε, τα οποία ιατρικά του εργαλεία τα είχαν θάψει μαζί και περιμένουμε τη δημοσίευσή του, ας το πούμε.
Yannis is not aware of whether he was an associate of Agathinos or not, but what he's saying is that a few years ago, the Archaeological Service in Sparta excavated the tomb of a doctor who was buried with his medical tools, and we are now awaiting the publication. It was found in the area of Limne, the Komi Limne.
Brilliant. I think we will all look forward to that. So the next question that I have here, do we know anything about malaria in ancient Laconia and Messenia? Are there any cures or prescriptions relating to it?
Μαλάρια, ελονοσία, έτσι δεν είναι?
Ναι, ελονοσία.
Λοιπόν, συνήθως τις επιδημίες, αφού είναι και της μόδας τώρα, οι επιδημίες συνήθως ήταν είτε οι πανόλοι, είτε τις λέγαν, ας το πούμε, είχαν την ονομασία λέπρα, λέπρα ή πανόλοι, εν πάση περιπτώσει τυφώδης πυρετός κλπ. Αναφορικά με την ελονοσία, η αναφορά στην... έχω και μάλιστα κρατήσει και μία σημείωση εδώ, μισό λεπτό σας παρακαλώ. Με συγχωρείτε λίγο. Yeah. Give me just 1 second. Συνήθως, όταν στα αρχαία ελληνικά κείμενα μιλάνε για τριταίο πυρετό, για πυρετό δηλαδή που επανέρχεται κάθε 3 μέρες, είναι μόλυνση από ελονοσία. Είναι δηλαδή μαλάρια. Πιθανότατα στην περιοχή μας, λόγω της... δεν υπάρχει κάποια σημαντική αναφορά για λοιμό στην περιοχή της Λακωνίας, της Μεσσηνίας, έτσι όπως περιγράφεται, ας το πούμε, αλλά σίγουρα η αναφορά σε τριταίο πυρετό κοντά σε ελώδεις περιοχές, όπως ήταν ελώδης περιοχή, ίσως και κάποια μέρη, σημεία του Ευρώτα ή η Νότια Λακωνία, να υπήρχαν περιπτώσεις μαλάριας. Οι πρώτες, ας πούμε, πιο ξεκάθαρη αναφορά σε επιδημία είναι βέβαια στο λοιμό, τον Αττικό λοιμό, Έτσι. Είναι στο λιμό του Αντωνίνου το δεύτερο μεταχριστιανικό αιώνα και βέβαια στο λιμό του Ιουστινιανού που ήταν η βουβονική Πανόλη.
So Yannis says that he's not aware of a plague in Laconia or Messenia at that time. There are indications of Tertium, Tyrteos Pyretos, which is like common in marshy areas like southern Laconia. We have Elos, for example, but also in parts of Eurotas. But it's nothing compared to like the Attic plague or the Athenian plague or the one of Antoninus in the 2nd century AD or Justinian plague.
Okay, thank you. A question now just about the nice inscription that you had towards the beginning of the talk there. Am I right in thinking that all of the names looked masculine, and if so, do we know anything about women also being involved in medicine in ancient Sparta?
Δυστυχώς όχι. Με απασχόλησε πάρα πολύ το θέμα της γυναίκας, γιατί η γυναίκα είχε μια ειδική, ας το πούμε, είχε μια σημαίνουσα θέση στην αρχαία Σπάρτη. Όλοι ξέρουμε την Αγνοδίκη, την Αθηναία. Υπάρχουν επίσης και κάποιες αναφορές σε Ελληνίδες ιατρούς, Ελληνίδες σκλάβες ιατρούς στη Ρώμη, όπως η Οριγένεια, η Φαβίλα. Παρ' όλα αυτά, όσο και να έψαξα τουλάχιστον βιβλιογραφικά, δεν μπόρεσα να βρω κάποια γυναίκα να έχει ιατρική, ας το πούμε, ιατρική ιδιότητα. Ίσως μου διαφεύγει κάτι.
So Yannis says that he's not aware of any Spartan women involved in medical science, like compared to, for example, Agnodiki, the Athenian, or the Greek slaves in Rome, like Origene or Favila. Yannis, I think the only reference or anything like related to medicine or remedies that springs my mind is the passage where in the Iliad, in the Odyssey, where Helen is preparing a potion for Telemachus and Menelaus to like make them feel better. But that's the only like Spartan related kind of like involvement of a woman with medicine that comes to my mind. But again, this is like, there is a fine line between, you know, medical practice and sorcery in a way. And that's the Odyssey.
Right then, thank you. Another question in now. What was the general medical health of the Spartans in the classical period? Were they thought to be quite a healthy people? And do we see any changes into the Hellenistic period and into the Roman period?
Αν κατάλαβα καλά, ποιο ήταν το πρότυπο, ας το πούμε, του υγείας?
Ποια ήταν η γενική υγεία των Σπαρτιατών στην κλασική περίοδο και αν βλέπουμε αλλαγές κατά την περίοδο αυτή και προς την ελληνιστική περίοδο. Οπότε ποια ήταν η υγεία των Σπαρτιατών, λοιπόν, αν γνωρίζουμε κάτι.
Ναι. Καταρχήν όλα έχουν σχέση με την υγιεινή διατροφή. Έτσι, έχει ενδιαφέρον ότι στο Κεάδα, όταν είχαν κατέβει σπηλαιολόγοι, πήραν δείγματα από τα οστά. Δεν ξέρω αν το ξέρετε, κυρία Γάλλο, αυτό. Πήραν δείγματα από τα οστά και διαπίστωσαν ότι το χέρι ήταν εξαιρετικά γυμνασμένο και είναι λογικό, τα οστά ήταν ανεπτυγμένα και η διατροφή τους ήταν πολύ πλούσια σε ψάρι. Δηλαδή αυτό ήταν ένα από τα συμπεράσματα. Τώρα, αναφορικά, αυτό το λέω αναφορικά με την υγεία, αναφορικά με το πρότυπο του Σπαρτιάτη ήταν το λεπτό και νευρώδες σώμα. Και υπάρχουν αναφορές που οι Σπαρτιάτες χλευάζουν άλλους οι οποίοι έχουν αφήσει τον εαυτό τους. Ωστόσο, αυτό το πρότυπο με την παρέλευση των χρόνων Και υπάρχει μάλιστα και ένα κείμενο το οποίο δυστυχώς δεν το έχω, που συγκρίνει την κατάσταση πριν με την κατάσταση μετά. Δεν το έχω πρόχειρο, αυτό εννοώ. Το πρότυπο σταδιακά άλλαξε όσο η κοινωνία άρχισε να φθήνει και να μεταλλάσσεται, ας το πούμε, σε κάτι άλλο. Δηλαδή όταν έχασε τα χαρακτηριστικά της κλασικής περίοδου. Τότε ο Σπαρτιάτης έγινε και πιο τριφυλός, δηλαδή άρχισε να του αρέσει περισσότερο η καλή ζωή με ό,τι αυτό συνεπάγεται.
Yeah, okay. So Yannis says that the health diet was like the main thing, and overall there was this prototype of slim and muscular. What he was also mentioning that I personally was not aware is that when the medical school, I think it was, with Professor Pitzios, wasn't it?
Pitzios και Themelis.
And Dr. Themelis, when they investigated the GATHA's feature, they sampled some of the bones that they found there, and the result was, the outcome of the analysis was that particularly the bones of the arms were very strong, and also it showed that the people had a diet rich in fish. However, he is also aware of a text, which he couldn't remember exactly what it was. We can definitely provide the information later. That makes a comparison between the classical period and the later period. And it seems that the kind of like the prototype change as the Spartans move into more luxurious lifestyle. So it definitely changes from the classical period.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Another question in here. Is there anything in the material record, like pottery, to support the understanding of Spartan medicine? Are there any examples in art on pottery of doctors?
Αν δεχτούμε ότι η Διόσκουρη είναι μία ιατρική θεότητα, είναι ιατρικές θεότητες, τότε ναι. Η Κύλικα του Αρκεσίλα, όπως είπαμε, που είναι δημιουργία λακωνικού εργαστηρίου και απεικονίζει το σύλφιο, το οποίο ήταν σημαντικό φάρμακο της αρχαιότητας. Και βέβαια νομίζω στην Νότια Λακωνία υπάρχει και στο Αρχαιολογικό Μουσείο της Νεάπολης στη συλλογή μία κεφαλή του Ασκληπιού. Γενικά δεν έχει, τουλάχιστον εγώ δεν γνωρίζω να υπάρχει κάτι, ας το πούμε, το οποίο να απεικονίζει όλες τις ιατρικές, κάτι που να απεικονίζει τις ιατρικές θεότητες της Σπάρτης. Ξέρω εγώ, για παράδειγμα, στη Σπάρτη λατρευόταν η Οφθαλμίτιδα Αθηνά, στο ιερό της οποίας κατέφυγε ο Λικούργος όταν ήθελε να περάσει, ας το πούμε, τις μεταρρυθμίσεις του και τον κυνηγούσαν οι ευγενείς. Ήταν η προστάτητα των οφθαλμών, ή η αμφλογύρα Αφροδίτη για τις Σπαρτιάτες, πέρα από το όσο κανένας άλλος έδιναν σημασία και στην τρίτη ηλικία. Δεν ήταν συνηθισμένο να δίνει κάποιος τότε σημασία στην τρίτη ηλικία. Και βέβαια το Μενελάιο με την Ελένη και οτιδήποτε έχει βρεθεί εκεί. Και βέβαια ίσως και ο ναός της Ορθίας Αρτέμιδος με τη λογική ότι ο όρθιος είναι ο υγιής. Έτσι δεν είναι? Και το άγαλμα το ξώανο της ωραίας Ελένης βρέθηκε όρθιο μέσα σε κλονάρια λιγαριάς. Έτσι αναφέρει ο Παυσανίας. Τώρα τουλάχιστον κάτι άλλο εγώ δεν γνωρίζω πέρα από αυτό.
Okay, so we have the depiction of the Dioscoroi who are associated with medicine, and the Arcesilas cap, which is associated with silphium and was the product of a Laconian workshop. At the museum, the archaeological collection of Neapolis, there is the head of Asclepius, And also we have the testimonies, for example, for the Avlogira Aphrodite, and also Artemis of Thalmytida, which is associated, who was associated with the eyes. Yeah.
Στη Σπάρτη ανακαλύφθηκε το ναό της Αρτέμιδος Κεφαρισίας. Εκεί λοιπόν υπάρχουν αναθήματα άνω άκρων, αναπαραγωγικών οργάνων, κάτω άκρων, αντίστοιχα με αυτά που οι Έλληνες αφήνουν στις εκκλησίες. Στο ιερό αυτό. Και μάλιστα με αναγραφές του ονόματος, ποιος εύχεται, ξέρω εγώ, Ξενό ή Ευχάνου. Δηλαδή, ποιος θέτει ποιος κάνει την προσφορά στη Θεά για την υγεία. Λοιπόν, και αυτό νομίζω αξίζει να το συμπληρώσουμε.
Yeah, and in terms of archaeological discoveries, we have the sanctuary of Artemis Kyparissia, where we have the dedication of body parts, including replicas of genitalia with dedications. We have the evidence from the Menelaon, Artemis Orthia, and it is interesting that with the Artemis Orthia, the xoanon of the goddess was found standing, which could be an indication of health, but more importantly, it was made of Ligaria, Agnus Castus. So we can see a lot of references in medicine. I should also add, Yannis, that we have the evidence for epiphallic figurines, which could, again, point to, in a different way, to medical practice, fertility, and could be in the same part as the female genitalia. We have, I think it was at the sanctuary of Zeus Messapeus that we have several examples.
Okay.
Do we have more questions?
I think we can probably do one more question if we have time.
Yes.
So Plutarch claims that Spartans were not allowed to learn a trade. Does that mean that doctors would have to be foreigners, or were Spartans still allowed to be doctors?
Ο Κτησίας ήταν από την Κνίδο. Ήταν ξένος. Βέβαια από πόλη της Δωρικής Εξάπολης. Ο Περίανδρος, άλλος Σπαρτιάτης γιατρός που έδρασε στη Σπάρτη, ήταν και ποιητής παράλληλα. Ωστόσο, ο γιατρός Δαμιάδας που ανέφερα πριν, ο Δαμιάδας, μόνο και μόνο το όνομα, το οποίο είναι δωρικό, έτσι, δείχνει πιθανότατα σπαρτιατική καταγωγή. Είναι μια πολύ ενδιαφέρουσα ερώτηση, με τη λογική ότι αν αποδεχθούμε την άποψη του Πλούταρχου ως ακριβή, δηλαδή ότι είναι ακριβής η άποψη του Πλούταρχου, ο οποίος απέχει βέβαια πολλά χρόνια από την κλασική περίοδο στην οποία και στους ρωμαϊκούς χρόνους ίσως με τους οποίους αναφερόμαστε, νομίζω ότι ο Κτησίας, ειδικά ο οποίος έδρασε την κλασική περίοδο, ναι, ήταν ξένος. Αργότερα με την ανάπτυξη της ιατρικής, φαντάζομαι ότι οι ανάγκες της Σπάρτης θα ήταν πολύ μεγαλύτερες, γιατί την απασχολούσε πάρα πολύ και η ολιγανδρία και η γονιμότητα και βέβαια η θεραπεία των τραυμάτων στη μάχη.
So Yannis is answering that the evidence we have, for example, from Ktisias, who was a famous doctor in Sparta, was that he was a xenos, a foreigner. We have Periandros, who was Yannis. Was he also a xenos, a foreigner? And
την περίοδο που έδρασε, δηλαδή 360-338, πιθανότατα, έτσι.
Yeah, so in the 4th century he was also probably foreigner. Damiadas was like a Spartan name, could probably
70 π.Χ.
and that was 70 BC. But of course, it's all like if we want to accept Plutarch, who was quite distant from the classical period. But what Yannis says is that during the classical period, things may have developed and there would have been more needs for the treatment of trauma, but also addressing the issues of oliganthropia or oliganthropia. So it could be that doctors were also trained in Sparta.
Επειδή υπήρχε και πολύ διαδεδομένη λατρεία του Σκληπιού και στην πόλη της Σπάρτης και ευρύτερα βέβαια στη Λακωνική.
And he brings the evidence for the widespread cult of Asclepius, not just in Sparta, but in the Laconiki more widely, as evidence that the medical practice, medical science would have been very developed. So one could expect that some people also trained to become doctors being Spartan. Good.
Okay, shall we go back to you then, Chrysanthi, for yes. Closing remarks?
So thank you very much, Yanni, for such a fascinating webinar. You have given us food for further thought, and I hope that our viewers found it interesting as well. As always, many thanks to my co-host, Mayor Doukas, to the city of Sparta, to my wonderful colleague, Hannah Regan, in the Department of Classics and Archaeology, who offer her times and support to the series, to my doctoral student, Matt Thompson, for his continuing help with the series, our star IT officer, Terry Wilmer, the wonderful Gabrielle Ban, and the marketing events team in the School of Humanities. I'd also like to acknowledge the help of the administrative staff in Sparta, in particular, Dimitris Sabatakakis, and our amazing viewers, you, who join us from all around the world. We look forward to welcoming you again in 2 weeks' time for the next Sparta Live event, that is on March 18th, for the webinar on adapting slavery to Spartan society with Dr. Davis Lewis of the University of Edinburgh. Also, if you are interested in the study of Greek tragedy, don't miss the webinar by Dr. Rosa Aduhar from King's College London on choral fragmentation in Greek tragedy, hosted by our Center for Ancient Drama and its reception on March 11th. So from me, goodbye for now, and please stay safe. Αγαπημένοι μας φίλοι και φίλες, γεια σας και να είστε καλά. Petros, over to you.
Gianni, many thanks, and Gianni, very informative of what you taught us tonight for a field that's not very well studied. Very little is known, so you bring a torch to the whole area, and we will try to exploit you in our effort to upgrade plant medicines from Parnon and Mount Taygetos. So you will hear from us, you will not escape. So many thanks, and keep up the research. We need more of what you're doing as soon as possible. And in 2 weeks' time, Chrysanthi, we're having this very interesting discussion on the helotage, I guess, Spartan helots, the slavery form of Sparta, which was also unique. People used to have slaves of their own, ownership of particular slaves. In Sparta, the slaves were common ownership, apparently. This is something very interesting to discuss. Most people think it's a dark page of Sparta, but the slavery is a dark page for the ancient world, no matter what. It was part of the reality of the time. So very exciting. And many thanks to all of you. And Yanni, again, many thanks. We appreciate
Thank you very much.
what you have been doing. And see you in a couple of weeks.